Hello friends, the article which we are analyzing today is published on Hindu June 29th, and the title of the article is In Border Claims Reimagining South Asia's Boundaries. It is written by Swatah Siddha Sarkar. So once again this article is mapped in three in my model. It is mapped, and here we can see that there are 3 points A, B, C, and the movement from A to B is time to shift from statist paradigm to regional paradigm. So what is statist paradigm? So first of all, we should know the concept of state, concept of nation, concept of security. These concepts, particularly the concept of state or nation, it is new concept. Earlier people means the country or something was not defined as a state. So it is a recent phenomena that the concept of a state has come. So any political science student knows that the how the this evolution of a state of concept happened. Similarly, that nation, if you look the history of India Pakistan partition, the Pakistan was made because Muhammad Ali Jinnah considered as a Muslim as a nation. So this was again this concept of nation was used for dividing India. So this is the way this evolution of concept of state or nation happened. So what author here is saying that to look any regional problem or any bilateral issues between two states, there is a need to change from this state based paradigm based on statist paradigm to regional paradigm. So what is statist paradigm? So here in this paradigm, state is whole and soul, means state on behalf of its citizen is the sole arbiter, because in any state the individual citizen is not free to take any decision, particularly uh, any transaction or any kind of exchange between other citizen of the state, because state as a sole arbiter decide on behalf of citizen of the country, citizen of that particular state. So it is a state that articulate, define and represent national interest with other states, and interstate relationship are viewed through that statist lenses. What it says, that it is a state which define what is national interest of national interest. It define and represent that national interest, and the kind of relationship between other state, that also state defines. So in that paradigm, territorial boundaries, means the boundary of a particular state, say Pakistan or India, those boundaries become sacrosanct, and they are valued more than lives or livelihoods and well-being of people living at border areas. So for any particular state, the people, those who are living at border area, their concern, the people, those who are living at border area, their concern, their lives or their livelihood take the do not take the precedent. What take the precedent is the boundary of that state. So it is more valued, boundaries are more valued than the lives of the people, those who are living at the borderland. So in this paradigm, people are defined in terms of singular, homogeneous and exclusive terms. So what we see as a concept of a state in this paradigm, a state is defined by the boundary, and state is a sole arbiter for defining the national interest or the kind of relationship they should have with the other state. So this is the unit we are seeing here. Now this paradigm what we are seeing is a recent phenomena, and now this paradigm need to be changed as per the author suggestion. What is the new paradigm? The new paradigm is a regional paradigm. So how it is different from state paradigm to regional paradigm? So here if you see, particularly this is more pronounced when you see the border area. Suppose this is a borderline between one state and second state. So this border area, even though it divides people between two different country or two different state, but there is a high amount of cultural, civilizational linkage between people, those who are living at border area across both the state. That we see the same thing is happening between India and Bangladesh. The people of West Bengal has a more affinity towards the Bangladesh people because of their cultural language ties. Similarly, between Pakistan and India, in the border region of Punjab, we see a lot of similarity. Similarly, in Pakistan and Afghanistan case, we see a lot of interaction between these two countries, and the same thing applies with India and Nepal case. So there is a lot of connectivity between people, those who are living at the border area of two countries. So that is the particular region author is talking about. So if we focus not just border but that region may have may contain two states, but that region can be considered as a unit because of shared cultural ethos or civilizational language. There may be many parameters which is making them a unit because of their similarity. So if that is the way we see the things, not in terms of border but in terms of similarity of people which may be living across two countries. So that is the paradigm author is talking about. So in that context, South Asia need to be rethought, not as a region of states, but as a region of regions. That means the whole South Asia may be considered different region. So that region should be considered, this whole South Asia will be made of different region, and different region may constitute the South Asia, and that particular region will have the similarity. So that is the new paradigm shift author is asking. And in that context, borderland area need to be cultivated out of contact zone which exists beyond the limit of territorial boundaries shared by the member states. So for that region, that borderland area, now we need to focus on the borderland area which may have more than two states because of their continuity or contiguous nature. And borderland regions share cultural, civilizational, livelihood background. As I told earlier, that particular region, border region across two countries, shared their cultural, civilizational, livelihood across these two regions. So such perspective is necessary to address contemporary crisis that has emerged from the Kalapani dispute. So in the context of India and Nepal, that dispute can be resolved if we change our perspective from state paradigm to regional paradigm, because that particular region of Kalapani may be claimed by India and Pakistan, India and Nepal both, but that region, if we consider it is in terms of regional paradigm, then we will be focusing about the people of that region, their culture, their livelihood, and all those things, not specifically in terms of who belongs to whom. So that kind of a regional approach we need to have with our neighboring country, because otherwise we are endangering the other regional experiment which we are planning to have, like BIMSTEC, BBIN, and SAARC. Because like there are many regional experiment India is part of, like Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, BIMSTEC, or with Bangladesh, Bhutan, and India, BBIN, or similarly SAARC. So our approach, what author is saying, should be based on region, and the whole geographical area should be considered as made of many regions, and individual regions should work as a unit, not state as a unit, so that the development or their need will be more specific, more localized way, and specific to their need, their cultural or civilizational requirement can be made. So that is the way the author has suggested, through which we Indo-Nepal relation can be improved, because now from the state paradigm to regional paradigm we need to shift. So this conclude the analysis of the first article. Now I'll go to the second thing. The second article is a editorial published on same date, June 29th, in Hindu. The title of this editorial is Brief Reprieve. The Hindu editorial, June 29th. It is written in the context of Pakistan and this FATF proceedings which is going on against Pakistan. So you may be aware that Pakistan is in Financial Action Task Force. Within that task force, Pakistan was kept in grey list. So Pakistan was earlier in this grey list in 2008 and 2012 and 15, between 2012 and 15, and again from June 2018 onwards. So now recently Pakistan was given an extension of 3 month, further 3 month extension given by FATF to fulfill its commitment regarding it has to meet those commitment so that it can be removed from grey list. In that context, Pakistan has met only 14 out of 27 requirements. So there are 27 requirements as projected by FATF. Out of those 27, Pakistan has met only 14 numbers. So remainings are pending. So why those things are pending? Because as you see the culture or the establishment of the Pakistan, the remaining requirement is very difficult for Pakistan to meet, because it is not only affecting Pakistan but their political and military establishment also getting seriously affected by those by meeting those requirements. So what are those issues which are still pending from Pakistan front? So what Pakistan need to do is to improve mechanism to curb terror financing. That is the first requirement. Second requirement is to amend law to curb hawala transaction. So there is a lot of transaction which happens without this banking channel. So that is called hawala transaction, that has to be curbed through law. And to place sanction against cash courier for terrorist. So again, for hawala transaction, there are people, those who do this kind of job, means they transfer cash from one place to another, and particularly for terrorists. So there is a requirement to put sanction on them. And the group or the individual banned by UNSC, so requirement says that those people need to be prosecuted. And the last requirement, what articles editorial says, is to convert madrasa into formal school. In Pakistan, there is a plenty of madrasas. Those basically are concentrating on focusing on giving religious teaching only. But again, religious teaching is not sufficient. They need to taught other subject also. For that purpose, there is a requirement that to convert madrasa into a formal school. So these are the pending issues which Pakistan has not met. So what editorial says, that Pakistan has no desire or no intention also to improve or to work on these lines. Why it is so? Because the recent Pakistani on Pakistan, there is a US report which says that it is still safe haven for most of the UN proscribed group, and steps to prosecute certain leaders are inadequate. So we know, India knows with its own experience, and that is backed by US report also, which says that Pakistan is still working as a safe haven for terrorism or terrorist group, and there is no serious work to prosecute those terrorists. And the second point, editorial says that the attitude of Pakistani establishment toward terror is clear when we see that PM Imran Khan is calling Osama bin Laden as a martyr. So you can see by their statement, which is made in parliament by their PM, that they are considering Osama bin Laden as a martyr. So you can have an idea what kind of attitude Pakistani establishment is having towards terrorists. So since Pakistan is in no mood to do further work on this front, so how can Pakistan come out from this grey list? So again, here Pakistan is banking on or counting on in its role in Afghanistan, because there is a talk going on in Afghanistan between Taliban, USA and Afghanistan government, and there Pakistan is playing a very important role because Taliban is mostly backed by Pakistan. So by working on giving solution in Afghanistan, Pakistan is hoping that it will come out from grey list of FATF. So that is the way Pakistan want to come out. Editorial is afraid that Pakistan will not try to resolve the real issues which are still pending, but through diplomatic concession or through geopolitical concern, it will try to come out from this grey list of FATF. So editorial suggests that Pakistan will do well if it meets the requirement of FATF, because these requirement of FATF not only is good for global fight against terrorism, but it is good for Pakistan also, because Pakistan itself is a big victim of terrorism. So this concludes the second analysis of the article. Now I'll go to the third one. This is the third article, Making Sense of China's Calculation. It is written by M.K. Narayan, and he is a former National Security Advisor and former Governor of West Bengal. So here again it is written in the context of China standoff. So here we can see that there is a changing nature of Indo-China relationship, and there is a now, because of this China's action at LAC, now we see that there is a new normal setting up at Indo-China relationship. So what is this new normal? We are aware that there because due to LAC standoff, there is a war-like situation between India and China. So why this is happening? This is happening because for LAC there is a different perception at India and in China. China's perception of LAC is based on situation at November 1959. But India's perception of LAC is based on September 1962 situation. So there is a difference in perception regarding LAC. Now there is an additional new thing which we are seeing now. And that new thing what we are seeing is that China is now claiming the whole Galwan Valley. That is an additional new point which we are seeing, and that is why it is becoming a new normal. So why China is asking for whole Galwan Valley? Because this will give China a virtual stronghold over the newly completed and strategically important Darbuk Sheokh Daulat Beg Oldie Road, which connected to Karakoram Pass. So China is trying to grab this Galwan Valley because a newly constructed road which is connecting to Karakoram Pass, it can choke that road by using that location. So that is the intention of China. And other thing which we see that standoff is triggered, and the other apart from this region, there are other region also, like India's recent statement related to Aksai Chin, because Aksai Chin is increasingly became important to China because it provides connectivity between two of its troubled region like Xinjiang and Tibet. And here we know that because of Muslim issue, China is having trouble, and here because of Tibetan Buddhist, China is facing issue. So the connectivity of these two regions goes through Aksai Chin. So that's why Aksai Chin, which India claim its territory, which China has illegally occupied, is becoming important for China. And other region author consider why this standoff happened because of India's growing strategic alignment with US, which is increasingly becoming clear to China, and China's own economy slowdown. And if you see the history of China has a perception or sensitive of its victimhood, because China considered that foreign power, when China was weak, foreign power had exploited China, and because of that China is very much sensitive to foreign exploitation. And now China perceive that its power has weakened because of COVID or economic slowdown, and that is being used by its adversary to that weakness is being used by other adversary. So that is the sensitivity China is having, and China want to give a message that it is not weak for that reason. It is doing this kind of thing to give a message to India and to other Asian or global power. So this is the background what we are seeing. In that context, why the article analyzed why India was not able to assess all these things before this standoff. So in that context, the intelligence failure is one issue. In that, for that reason, author says that it is not that India do not have a intelligence, because all the technical or signal or imaginary based intelligence we are very well prepared and we have a good quality of intelligence. The problem is of the assessment of that information. Means you have got the information, but somebody should be there to make the meaning out of that information. That part was weak, and failure to analyze, assess, or interpret the available intelligence regarding China's intention. So, India's failure was to assess or interpret the available intelligence regarding China's intention, not the lack of intelligence. It was a failure of assessment. So, in that context, author says that anyway, deciphering China's intention, understanding the Chinese mind, or making sense of Chinese thinking is extremely difficult in normal time also. Because you see that China is a very close country. The kind of information which is coming out from China is very difficult to get, because China is not a democracy. Their media is not free. So we can see that there is a dearth of information which can reliably be taken. So that is the thing. So in that context, understanding the Chinese mind or making sense of their action is very difficult. So recently one interview I saw, in that Subramaniam Swamy was telling that Chinese people do not fear God, they do not fear devil. What they fear is a foreigner who is speaking Chinese. That means it says that they are very much fearful of people, those who can understand Chinese language, because it is such a difficult language. Because they consider that whoever is taking trouble to learn Chinese language is having some ulterior motive. So we can see that compared to Pakistan, we have very lack of information, lack of expertise with related to China. And China being not a democratic or open country, the real picture of China or their thinking or their move is very difficult to come. And that is why there is a challenge in assessing or interpreting whatever the move China is making. So this is again lack of assessment is one factor which is coming out here. And in that context, author is telling that India is gradually having less and less domain expertise in the field of China, because our focus is mostly shifting towards US, and we are seeing that we are having lack of expert. So what author is suggesting, that we should have a expertise on Chinese affairs, so that we can understand and we can properly assess the Chinese move with respect to India. And for that purpose, summit diplomacy is not sufficient, because it grabs attention, but in terms of result, it is not that much useful. What is required is a structured foreign office policy making. So summit diplomacy, occasionally it is okay, but the regular way it should be driven by the foreign office policy only. So that way we can respond better to Chinese move. We should invest in creating domain knowledge of Chinese affairs, and we should have a expertise so that we can properly assess the information which we are gathering through intelligence. And we have to take all these things in background, because Chinese is increasingly becoming sensitive. So how their sensitivity is affected by our action, that also we have to consider. So this conclude my analysis of third article. I hope this will improve your understanding. Thank you.